First, we will lay out the basic back bodice pattern of the blouse. So we have folded this because the bodice of the blouse is whole. So we need a whole fabric. So we're folding this. This has to be on fold. And to make sure that this is on grain, we make sure that the measurement of the selvage to the fold is the same from top to bottom. So we measured 12.5 inches or 32 centimeters. Okay, now we will start pinning the pattern on the fabric. We make sure on the shoulder line, we need 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters for the sewing allowance. So we will start pinning from the center back, from top to bottom. Now we pin the shoulder line, the area of the armhole, the area of the armhole and side seam, the side seam area, and the side seam and the hemline area. For the hemline, we will need a fold allowance of 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters. So we will mark this. Then, on the side seam, we will need 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters sewing allowance. Then, on the area of the armhole, we will get 1/2 of an inch or 1.3 centimeters. On the shoulder line, we will get 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. And on the neckline, we will get 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters. As you can see, the allowance has to follow the curve of the neckline. We can't mark the sewing allowance this way or we will fall short of our sewing allowance. The same holds true for the shoulder and armhole corner. We have to follow the shoulder line and the armhole line with uniform sewing allowances. So also with this, the corner of the armhole and the side seam and the corner of the side seam and the hemline. With these markings, we can start cutting our fabric. Okay, we have cut the back bodice. I will set this aside and the excess fabric here I will cut. Okay, now for the front bodice, I will fold the fabric this way. Okay, and move it here. Okay, I will check the length of our front bodice. Okay, I will fold the fabric until we have the adequate sewing allowances. Okay, since we have a straight line here where the selvages are, I will just turn over the fabric. We make sure that the fabric is on grain. Okay, now I will lay the front bodice pattern here. On this side where the facing edge is, we will need a 1/4 of an inch or 0.6 of a centimeter allowance. And here on top, we will need 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. So, as you can see, this is more than 1/4 of an inch, but this is okay as we have enough fabric. Our fabric should have been 1.5 yards, but this fabric is 2 yards. Also, the width of the fabric is 45 inches. Now, from the edge of the selvage, I will measure the distance from the edge of the selvage to the line of the facing allowance, which is 5 3/4 inches. I will pin this here, and again from the line of the facing allowance, I will get the same amount of distance, which is 5 3/4 inches or 14.5 centimeters. Again, I will move. Okay, might as well start from the bottom to get 5 3/4 inches or 14.5 centimeters here. So now I am sure that I have laid out the front body's pattern of the blouse on grain. The neckline area here. The shoulder line. The armhole area. This is our hidden dart. The corner of the armhole and the side seam. Side seam. And the side seam and the hemline. Again, we will start marking the allowances. On the edge of the facing, we just need 1/4 of an inch or 0.6 of a centimeter. And here at the bottom or the hemline, we will go out 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters. For the side seam, we will go out 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. For the armhole, we will need a 1/2 of an inch or 1.3 centimeters sewing allowance. For the shoulder, again we need 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters sewing allowance. For the neckline, we need 1/2 of an inch or 1.3 centimeters sewing allowance. And for the shoulder line, where the facing is, we need 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters sewing allowance. Okay, now we can start cutting the fabric. We're cutting the neckline allowance and the shoulder line allowance and the side seam allowance. Now we will cut the allowance of the armhole. As you can see, I'm not cutting this way but following the shape of the armhole. So we have completed cutting the fabric for the front bodies of the blouse. We will set this aside. I choose to lay out my sleeve pattern on the bottom of the fabric because there is a smear on this area. That's why we were given extra half yard. Anyway, we will make sure that this line, the center line, is on grain. We do this by measuring. First, we have to make sure that the distance here on the side of the end of the cup line, we have 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters per side for sewing allowance. Then, we will make sure, okay, here, 7.5 inches is more or less, okay, from the fold of the fabric, if we go in until the center of the sleeve, the center of the pattern, we are getting 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. This is what we will use to make sure that we are on grain. Okay. For the bottom of the sleeve pattern, we will go out or mark 1/4 of an inch or 0.6 of a centimeter sewing allowance. Then on the side of the sleeve, we will get 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter sewing allowance. For the cup line, we just need 1/2 of an inch or 1.3 centimeter sewing allowance. Again, here on the side, we need 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter sewing allowance. Okay, since this has a lot of shape, we can sort of mark where we will be cutting so we don't make any mistakes. So here, okay, here, okay, we can start cutting the sleeve pattern on the fabric. Okay, we've cut the sleeve pattern of the fabric. We can mark the center with a notch. And we can also mark the center with a notch, the hemline area. I hope you can see it here. Okay. Now we will lay out the collar. The collar is laid out this way on the lengthwise grain, not this way. Because if we lay out the collar this way, it can get stretched, while here it remains steady. So we lay out our collar this way. We just need 1/2 of an inch sewing allowance on the bottom of the collar. So we can move this. Again, we can measure to make sure that we're on grain. We can measure this, which is, we need a distance of from here, 3.5 or 8.5 centimeters. Okay, we can now start pinning our collar. All the sides of the collar, except this part which is folded, need a 1/2 of an inch or 1.3 centimeter sewing allowance. I don't have to mark this I can just estimate the allowance that I need, which is 1/2 of an inch for 1.3 centimeters. This is a thin fabric, so I think I cut a portion of the edge of the selvage, but for a thick fabric and for a collar pattern, I think you should avoid cutting or including the selvage because this area is thick because of the closely weaved thread on the edge of the fabric, which is a selvage. We have now the cut fabric for the collar. We have now completed cutting the straight blouse with the basic short sleeves and a sports collar.